Welcome to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm Melissa Joy, a certified financial planner and the founder of Pearl Planning. My goal is to help you streamline and organize your finances, navigate big money decisions with confidence, and be strategic in order to grow your wealth. As a woman, you work hard for your money, and I'm here to help you make the most of it. Now, let's get into the show. No one expects to get in an accident, and when you do, if you're injured, it can be a once in a lifetime difficult experience that is very difficult to prepare for, and most of us have not been through it. And so today we're going to be talking about injuries after an accident with an attorney who has experience dealing day in, day out with these types of circumstances. I'm thrilled to be joined by Megan Burns. She is the founder of Mirador Law, and she is a trial lawyer for personal injury law. Megan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I know that this topic is not something that any of us want to have to deal with, but sometimes you don't have a choice. And I know in my experience when talking with clients or having been in, for example, car accidents myself, when that moment comes, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of unexpected hassles, and there's not really a script that most of us have knowing how to deal. Um, we've talked a little bit about this episode already, and I think the place we would start is insurance, right? Like, what do you do if you find yourself having injuries or damages after an accident?
Myself was injured in an accident when I was in my early 20s. I was a collegiate soccer player, played Division I soccer at Boston College for 4 years. And shortly after that, I was in a serious bike accident that really did change my life in many respects. And so um, I remember myself having a financial advisor in my early 20s who talked to me about the importance of personal injury and how it affects your financial plan. And so that's what I think we're here to talk about today is
Mm-hmm.
everybody makes plans for the future. Nobody makes plans for getting injured and how that's going to impact your finances and your life. And so hopefully we can cover that. But I think you're right. The first place to kind of turn to is really making sure that you understand the insurance coverages that you have. Most people, and this is true of so many of my clients, even people that work for me, I feel like I'm constantly getting public service announcements on the
Mm-hmm.
importance of insurance. Because when you look at your insurance, maybe once a year when it's renewing, and you don't really think about how it might actually play out if you really need it.
That's so true. And nowadays, insurance prices are going up and up all over the country. And so when you're looking at it, a lot of times you're just like, how can I make this cost not go higher so much? How can we keep under inflation instead of way overshooting inflation? And so you may not be like having your primary focus be on how to reduce risk and mitigate risk if something goes wrong.
Yes, that's right. And if for people that care about having their finances in order, you're always trying to save money. And insurance
Hmm.
is a place where you can try to save money, but there's a cost to that. And that is when you really need it. And I'm not talking about a little fender bender where you like had to take the afternoon off work. I'm talking about a car accident or some other accident that dramatically changes your life. And having the right insurance mix in place becomes so critical so that all these hard things that you work for, developing your financial wellness plan, don't just become derailed in an instant. So the first kind of thing that, I would advise people to look at is just their auto insurance. That's,
Hmm.
for most people, that's probably where you have the risk, particularly in a state like Michigan where you need to drive everywhere and it's not so easy to get anywhere on public transportation. We're in our cars, a lot. I
Hmm.
grew up in Michigan, but I live in California, but it's really not that much different here either.
Right.
And so, you know, um, We can talk a little bit about the difference of how insurance markets are structured in different states because there can be huge differences. And Michigan, in particular, has a very unique insurance structure as it applies to auto insurance. But just generally speaking, what are your limits, right? It doesn't really matter if you're in a no fault state or you're in a who's at fault in the accident state. The reality is, what are your limits and how are you covered? Um, and although you can kind of pinch a penny by, maybe having your premiums a little bit less, I would suggest to folks that really want to make sure they're covered is to think of insurance as a financial hedge.
Mhm.
And that's what I advise my clients. That's what I advise my friends and family and anybody else who I have an opportunity to talk to. It really is more of a financial hedge. And so sometimes you save a little bit of money, but you expose yourself to a lot of risk.
Especially as your estate grows, as you get closer to retirement, as your assets convert from your human capital to to financial accounts and residences, etcetera, then, you have more that you need to insure for, to protect yourself, and, so there's a lot to consider, and it's a little more complicated than just plugging things in and finding the cheapest quote in many cases.
That's exactly right. So let's just talk a little bit about the difference between default and no
Wall.
fault, states. Michigan is a no fault state, but there's been major modifications to the no fault
Mhm.
laws in the state of Michigan in 2020. California, for example, and most other states are what are called, just general liability fault states. So, the person's insurance who pays for your accident is the person that is responsible, who's negligent, who caused the accident. So if you are in a no fault state, for example, and you're driving through the state of California and somebody seriously injures you, you better make sure that you have enough insurance to cover you, even if the other driver has really bad insurance. So I have clients all the time that have catastrophic life changing injuries, but the person who hurt them has very, very minimal basic insurance. Here in California, the minimum requirements are $15,000 per person and $30,000 per incident. That doesn't even scratch the surface of what
Mhm.
someone's medical bills might be if they are catastrophically or seriously injured and need to take a significant time off work as a result of that. So in California, we talk a lot about having uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage. And the way that works is that if you get hurt by someone who has poor or no insurance, then you can then make a claim on your own insurance for up to your own uninsured or underinsured limits. And so you really want to, at least in fault states, you want to have really strong uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage because you want to protect yourself. It's you also want to make sure you're adequately covered if God forbid you hurt somebody else, but it's really important to have enough insurance to cover your own um, injuries. And that really is not that much different in Michigan, for example, which
Mhm.
is a no fault state. So in Michigan, the way it works is it doesn't matter who's at fault in your accident. You make a claim on your own auto insurance, and your own auto insurance pays your medical bills, your lost wages, that kind of thing, unless it's a very serious accident or some other like a wrongful death or something like that. There's certain parameters when you can go outside of your own insurance. But what they did in 2020 in the state of Michigan is it used to be that there was unlimited medical payments and it was a
Mhm.
no fault state. So if you were catastrophically injured, you could be assured that your auto insurance was going to cover your medical bills forever if necessary. And that's the big
Mhm.
change that happened in 2020. So you can still make that election But it's all about cost, right? Of course, if you
It's a
want,
choice.
it's a choice. So if you want to have unlimited medical payments through your own insurance and you're in a no fault state, you're going to pay extra for it. But again, sometimes folks can be penny wise and pound foolish.
Mhm.
If you have um, $1 million in medical bills that you're going to need to spend over the next 10, 15 years, it could destroy your financial well being. And it could have just been a different box that you selected in your auto insurance. So I don't sell insurance. I'm not
Right.
an insurance broker. I don't teach insurance law or anything like that. But doing personal injury work, I see this play out every day for my clients and also just people that call me and want generalized advice when something bad happens. So I see how important the insurance piece is. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, you're really seeing the stories and the situations that I would rarely see, because you are doing work where maybe the insurance companies, when you file the claim, um, either you're underinsured or there's a dispute with the insurance company or you need to pursue further action in order to be compensated for, what's happened, after the accident. Is that right? Like, for the first course of action when you get in an accident is follow the rules of the state and file a claim with whose ever insurance is responsible for kind of kicking things off. And your insurance agent is kind of a quarterback or a coordinator with your insurance company. Is that right?
That's correct. And what I would suggest is before that accident happens, you really make sure you check your policies at least once a year. And you check it
Mhm.
in relation to where your financial plan is. So if as your financial plan grows, it's more and more important for you to protect those assets by having adequate insurance, which means you may be paying a little bit more, but it's that financial hedge that you're looking at. So I would say before you get in an accident, really check your policies. And one thing that people never do, and I have done this my whole career, but I can't say I've read every single insurance policy I've ever had, but it is important to really kind of look at the details of the policy, either working with a good insurance broker that you really trust that knows what they're doing, and or just reading your own policies. I mean, when we go through the website and we make these choices of which coverage we want and we see the premium that we're going to pay, it's just like a check through box. Well, behind that is about a 200-page contract that
Mhm.
you have available to you through all your insurance carriers. And you absolutely, I make it a point of making sure that I have all the contracts, all the insurance policies, all the addendums, all the riders for each policy that I have in place. And that I do my best to make sure when they renew that I read through them. I know that's a lot of work, but it's after the accident happened when people get surprised. "Oh, I thought I was covered for that." And then you realize that, "Oh, no, you accepted a low limit on medical payments even though you're in Michigan and you're a no-fault state, and you're really in a bad spot if you can't then go beyond your own policy and sue the other driver." So, I would say think and make sure you do an insurance audit at least once a year before an accident takes place. But yes, once the accident takes place, certainly reporting it is the first step in the process.
So then, if there are medical expenses, especially that can't be covered by the insurance coverages that were selected, are there any other avenues before you get to the zone of, using the legal field and litigation? Would your like disability insurance or other types of coverages be able to step in?
Yeah. So, um, certain employers obviously provide disability insurance.
Hmm.
Sometimes that's limited. Usually disability insurance through your employer is limited to your employment with that company and potentially maybe limited to just on the job injuries.
Hmm.
So I very distinctly remember in my early 20s when I was working with a financial planner, and we think about life insurance a lot, it being important in case we die, that our families are protected, but not as many people understand the importance of disability insurance, because what if I am still with my family and they're lucky enough to still have me in their life, but I'm not the same person I am anymore. I can't do that job that I could do. I mean, I'm a trial lawyer. I get up in front of courtrooms and juries, and I advocate for my clients day in and day out. I use my brain for everything. God forbid I was to have a traumatic brain injury. I could not do my job. And what would my family do? Because they would not be able to access any life insurance because I'm still here and I might be here for a long time.
And
So,
they need to take care of you in some cases.
absolutely. And so sometimes disability insurance, and I know, again, talk to your own financial advisor, talk to your insurance broker, but in some respects, I would advocate that disability insurance is as important, if not more important, than life insurance. You want to,
The probability for needing it is higher than, needing life insurance earlier in your life. And typically, at the point in time where the average American passes away, they've saved for retirement and their children would be independent and their spouse would likely for wealthier Americans have the assets they need, but that's not the case when it's earlier in your career. And you may need a long period of time where you live off of disability. And the government version of disability is very, very low through Social Security.
and most people that, care about financial wellness, and how, really educate themselves about that. A lot of people are in jobs where they really need their brain. And so not
Mhm.
car accident results in a brain injury, but what if you needed a knee surgery? You couldn't get, to and from work for a month or 3 months, or a back surgery, or, I mean, there's a lot of sort of physical injuries that happen that have dramatic impacts on your ability to make a living, for you and your family, particularly if you're the primary breadwinner. Even then, disability insurance, and even if your employer offers disability insurance, you can still go in the private market and get your own disability insurance to supplement. Because that's always what I worry about. For me personally, that is part of my financial hedge, that I make sure I always have a good quality disability policy.
Well, and we're both business owners. Oftentimes, the disability insurance you get through an employer is limited to for highly compensated employees. And if you're a business owner, if you're a medical doctor who's taken on a lot of debt in order to go through law school, there's a variety of circumstances where the group policies, which tend to be much more accessible and also cost effective, are not going to fulfill all of your needs for disability. So, case by case basis, but definitely additional disability insurance can be appropriate.
I hear a lot from my clients too about needing to get back to work because they can't miss
Yeah.
more time off work, and they don't want to then go get the medical treatment that they need because of their accident. You know, um, I am sure a lot of your listeners probably have certain views about what personal injury lawyers are all about. Greedy people. I mean, last time I flew into Detroit, I don't think any billboard that I passed was not a personal injury lawyer's. I get it.
There's a lot of personal
It's
injury and
insane.
marijuana billboards.
Yeah,
That's about it.
I forgot about marijuana, but yeah, we're on a lot of, billboard lawyers that say they do
Yeah.
personal injury cases, and it certainly gives. I don't think those folks that are marketing in that way to consumers really do very well by themselves, because it creates an impression that personal injury lawyers don't care about their clients and that they're all in it for their own personal greed. And I'm not here to say that there are not lawyers that are greedy, that they're not here to like take advantage of something horrible that happened to you and make money off of it. There are certainly folks in my industry that are like that, but not all the lawyers out there are are practicing law that way. Certainly that's not how we practice. We practice with a deep center on what's best for our clients and how we can get the clients the best outcome possible. Um, so I mean, I have to say, in this podcast, it really is important to hire a good lawyer. And I'll even tell your listeners when they don't need a lawyer, because I give that public service announcement probably every other day to people that consult with me. But if you are seriously injured And I'm not talking again a little fender bender where you have half a day off work or something. I'm talking about a real serious injury that's dramatically impacting your life. You really need a good quality lawyer because you are not going to be able to navigate the insurance system and the legal system to get justice for yourself. It's virtually impossible. It is not a system that's set up for consumers to be able to handle their own cases.
So there's a fender bender, there's physical damage to your car, the car's totaled. Those are things that are typically handled through claims adjusters and the insurance company route. A bruise or a contusion that's fixable and repairable, the same. You're maybe the doctor's appointments are compensated through insurance, and you're again dealing with a claims adjuster on the healthcare side. But then, when is the right point in time where you would advise someone to talk to an attorney or get legal advice?
Uh, so I guess any sort of serious catastrophic injury where you believe you're injured at the fault of another is one where you should be consulting with an attorney. So
Okay.
obviously wrongful death, paralysis, serious spinal injuries, serious brain injuries, broken bones that require surgery, other sorts of injury to the body that require surgery. Those are generally,
Hospitalization,
yeah,
I would assume. Mhm.
correct. If you like a night in the ER, you may not need you probably don't need a lawyer if they've run all the tests and they've all come out right as rain. It's usually those cases where you are much more seriously injured that
Mhm.
require it. And it, you know, how do you find a good quality attorney? That's hard
Right.
because there are private equity companies that are investing in the personal injury space. There are these big national law firms that you might be talking to a lawyer that's based in Tennessee when your accident was in upstate New York, and you don't even really realize it. That these are not,
Like, that doesn't that happen where, like, law firms kind of buy the leads from the local attorneys that, they get some kickback for advertising locally, and then they send them through to a big national firm?
yeah, there's a lot of shady stuff that happens with personal injury lawyers. So, I mean, maybe I'll get some shade for saying this, but I guess the first thing that I would do is if you see somebody on a billboard, you probably don't want to hire that person. That's horrible as that is. And I hope somebody that does a lot of billboard advertising reaches out to me and says, you got it wrong, you got it twisted. But I think you have to be a bit of a savvy consumer in the personal injury space because so much money gets spent on personal injury attorney advertising because they are
Mhm.
trying to get your serious injury case. And my law partner and I, we're a small 5 lawyer boutique firm here in the Bay Area. We describe those law firms as mills. A lot of times they do great job advertising. They maybe do a really good job with the salesmanship on the front end. But the people that are actually handling your case may not even be attorneys. They may be some sort of legal assistant or
Like a
quote
case
unquote
manager,
case manager.
paralegal?
And it's
Mhm.
not even touching your file. So, how do you find good quality lawyers? You have to be discerning when you Google. You really have to if it's coming up as an ad, maybe skip past that and go to the mapping section and look for somebody that does have a lot of good, reviews are a good way, but reviews can also be bought. And so you can't always trust reviews. I really recommend people go and meet lawyers in person. It's so easy
Mm.
to do a lot of legal services by Zoom, but you still can't be sure that they're who they say they are. I mean, you're trusting your future to them. And I think you should look lawyers straight in the eye.
Mhm.
What a better way to do it. You say you're a local attorney. I want to drive to your office and I want to have a consultation. You know, what is their demeanor like? What is their outfit like? What does their office look like? If it looks like a shabby place at a strip mall, probably not a lawyer you want to hire when you're seriously injured in an auto accident. Um, Going through people that have referrals who've had good experiences, that is can be a great way. If you know anybody who is a lawyer that's not a personal injury lawyer, but just maybe a tax lawyer or even an accountant or a financial advisor, anybody that's like a white collar professional in your life, they probably know some lawyers. And if they know one lawyer, that lawyer probably can connect you to a good personal injury lawyer. So reputation is super, super important. The other thing is each state has different sorts of professional organizations for attorneys, just like other sorts of white collar professionals. You want to check people's uh, check them on the state bar website. Have they had any discipline before? Because that is
Mhm.
all public information. So before you hire a lawyer, make sure you go to your state's um, your state bar website and check them to make sure that they don't have a history of disciplinary action. And then look to see if they're involved in any local organizations. For example, I'm one of the past presidents of the Alameda County Bar Association. So, my county deemed it appropriate for me to be the leader of our legal community here in our county. And so when people take on leadership roles, they're usually well regarded in the community. And so that's another way to kind of like check and see, is this person really legit or not? And then the other thing I would say, and this is very true in the personal injury space, there's a big difference between just being a good lawyer and being a trial lawyer. And
Mhm.
insurance companies are set up to pay you as little as possible for your injuries. They are going to deny your claims. They are going to say, oh, this didn't really impact your life. You're lying. You're making it up. You're exaggerating. Your injuries are really from something else, even when you are totally, upright.
Fine before.
Well, and it's not the insurance adjuster's fault. Like they're in a system where people do lie. They're dealing with shady personal injury lawyers all the time, and so it's they get jaded, and so they don't trust.
And I've also seen coverage that because both private equity as well as consulting firms are coming in and advising insurance companies on how to cut costs and how to be more profitable, that is a factor too, is like if you first deny claims, in some cases, then that, and make it more difficult to receive insurance. I'm not saying every company, but that just, there has been coverage about that as well. So you may just be up against a wall if you have a significant claim.
Yeah, and so that there is a huge difference with hiring a personal injury lawyer that's actually a trial lawyer. That is
Mhm.
difference. So, very few lawyers take cases to trial. Personal injury is an area where a lot of times cases need to go to trial, not because there's a question of who's responsible, but just because the insurance company will not give clients fair justice without seeing the whites of a juror's eyes. And it literally comes to that. And if you hire an attorney, and I would say ask the lawyer that you're talking to, when's the last time you have actually done a jury trial? That is a really
Uh,
good question. If this person is saying they've been handling personal injury cases for the last 20 years, and the last time they did a trial was 20 years ago, you have a problem. That means they're not quite fighting quite hard enough for their clients, and the insurance companies know it. They have amazing data. They have these huge, of course, they use AI, but they have all this data that they compile about personal injury settlements and verdicts throughout the country to try to make appropriate offers in each individual case. But they also know who the lawyers are. Like, it, it's a lot of times some of the results that we're getting are confidential. Like, they're not results that we can publish or advertise about because our firm might be getting an outcome for a client that's wildly better than what another law firm might get with the same facts. And it's because we've taken cases to trial and because we've gotten far better than what the last offer was. So it really does matter that you're dealing with somebody that's sophisticated in the personal injury space. And again, I'm not saying for the little case. I think it's important. I'd love to
Yeah.
spend a few minutes to talk about when people absolutely do not need a lawyer. Um,
Yes, that would be super helpful, and then if you can talk about that, just like, when it's like, don't even reach out, and then I'd love to hear about just some of the practicalities if you do need a lawyer, about how things would work after you interview and decide on working with someone.
sure. So when do you not need a lawyer? So first of all, personal injury lawyers, 99.9% of them get paid on what's called a contingency fee basis. So this is very different than any sort of fee structure you'd ever have with any kind of attorney. And what it means is they're going to get paid as a percentage of the recovery. And the reason
Mhm.
for that is that there's a lot of seriously injured people that can't afford attorneys. And so the only way for those people to hire attorneys is to do it on a contingency fee basis. And contingency fees usually range, between a third to 40% of the total gross amount that your case settles for. Some, not our firm, but some law firms go up as high as 50% the day they
Mm.
sign the case up for. So they really are in it to take as much money as possible. So I'm constantly telling people, you know what, you don't really need a lawyer for this. And it really comes down to money. If if your case, like let's say, I'll give a perfect example, rear end fender bender, you had to go to urgent care. You had one or two follow ups with your primary care physician. Maybe you did a couple sessions of physical therapy and you had to take 2 or 3 days off work. It's clear the other person is responsible. You definitely have damages. But I'll be honest, those kind of injuries do not require an attorney, and you probably should not hire an attorney. You're still going to have to get all your bills and all your medical records, and you're going to have to go and negotiate directly with
Push
the
back.
insurance carrier.
Yeah.
So you got to be a little savvy and, maybe Chat GPT or Claude can kind of help be your, pro bono attorney process, but you really don't need a lawyer. Like if your case is worth $10,000 and a lawyer is going to take a third of it, they would need to get at least $15,000 for you to, have an ROI on the fact you hired that lawyer. That's why the smaller the case, the less important it is to have an attorney because they're taking such a much larger chunk of what you'd be getting. Now, y you know, I have had many cases where insurance adjusters are desperately trying to, like, offer somebody $25,000, and we get that person a seven-figure settlement because, that's what the case was really worth. Those are the people that need a lawyer, is when they're
And you're gonna assess somebody reaches out to you or someone like you and says, "Here's my situation," and then you'll say, "Hey, based on what I understand and all my experience seeing this day in, day out, go back and ask again for your medical bills to be covered," versus like, "I think I have a good case that could work out well for both of us."
yeah. And the other thing is you don't have to decide right away. Lawyers are really pushy trying to get you to sign up. Insurance adjusters, like one thing with insurance companies, like they'll start calling you and they'll like blow you up if you don't have an attorney.
Mm.
As soon as you have a lawyer, the call stops. So that is one benefit of having an attorney. But they'll want you to sign on the dotted line because a lot of people they are missing time off work. They're desperate. They want to like get some money right away, and so they sign, not really realizing how serious their injuries are. And again, I'm not here to give everybody all the law of personal injury, but just generally speaking, there's statute of limitations to file lawsuits. And at least in the state of California, the general statute of limitations is 2 years from the date of the incident. And so when you have a situation where you're injured, some people may not realize the extent of their injury for several weeks, if not months. And so in those situations, you don't want to act too hastily because you might initially say, you know what, I don't feel that injured. I'm a little bit injured, but I'm not really that injured. And then all of a sudden, like that pain in your neck that you thought was just whiplash, it doesn't go away. And so then you get referred to a specialist, and lo and behold, you have a bulging disc in your neck. And then, your treater or your specialist is recommending surgery. Well, in those cases, if you've taken the lowball offer from the insurance carrier because you were trying to save a buck because you didn't want to hire a lawyer, you are out of luck. If you've signed off and you've taken their $25,000 payment and your case is really worth $500,000, because you didn't fully assess how injured you really are, that's the other risk to it. So I guess I would just also caution people that if you are injured in an accident, really give it several weeks, if not a few months, before you make that decision. And if you're talking to a good, reputable, quality, honest personal injury lawyer, they're going to tell you that. They're going to say, "Why don't you see how you feel in a month?" And somebody from my staff is going to reach back out to you and check in on you because you may not need a lawyer. So let's circle back on that on a month, which is what I do all the time. But you know, they're not going anywhere. They're going to, if your case is a good case, they'll sign you up in a month or two. So you might also consider that, just seeing how things are playing out before you do anything too drastic in terms of trying to resolve the case quickly.
And then what happens, like, let's say that you found an attorney you like and they've assessed that this could be a case and it makes sense to sign up. What can you expect from there? Because I know it's not an immediate, like, oh, they made a phone call and then here's your check. How do things go from there all the way from, a better offer or settlement to a trial?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it's a long process. Basically, the lawyer needs to be assured that either, I talk there's something called, like a perfect recovery.
Mm,
You had a serious accident and you've had a perfect recovery. You've gotten back to exactly the person you were before the accident. You're right as rain. That's how I describe it. A lot of people that experience serious injuries, they have what's called an imperfect recovery.
mm,
They recover to a degree, but maybe they're not the same person they were before, and maybe they never will be. Maybe your brain injury healed, but your brain injury, you still have residuals that are permanent.
mhm.
Maybe you had to have a knee surgery and you can walk on your knee, but you're, a super, competitive
You're not back on the
amateur
soccer field. Yeah.
soccer field. You're not skiing like you used to, and it's really affecting your mental health because you love that outdoor activity, whatever it might be. So that's what we would call an imperfect recovery. So lawyers generally, they want to know you're either number one, done treating completely, and you've had that perfect right as rain recovery, and then they can best assess what your case is worth. Or that's what lawyers should be doing. Or you get to a point in your treatment, and this is in consultation with experts and your treaters and carefully reviewing your medical records and consultation with you about how you're doing. There's an appreciation that you're going to have an imperfect recovery. And
Mhm.
that's the point at which a good personal injury lawyer is really best suited to be able to evaluate your case and get you the best outcome. So, people always get anxious. They're like, I signed up with you and this is taking so long. Now I have to file a lawsuit and now they want to do my deposition. And why does everybody need every single page of my medical bills? It's part of the process. And a good lawyer will obviously explain it all to you. And so you can be prepared and you know what to expect. But it is a long process, unfortunately.
Well, I appreciate your insight in taking us behind the scenes of the way an attorney thinks about personal injury, as well as I know some of you listening hopefully don't have this situation, but may have a friend who needs help. And you can refer back, to kind of these lessons. As we wrap things up, I just can't emphasize enough both how valuable insurance can be for, it really does make part of the risk world go around. And so do pay attention to what coverages you have. One of the things we didn't mention that is can be important is umbrella liability insurance as well that protects you if the results of an injury or an accident exceed your coverages from your other policies, including auto and homeowners policy. Have you had those types of policies kick in for your clients in past situations?
Yes, this is a place where you really need to look at the line items of what an umbrella coverage actually covers because a
Mhm.
lot of them coverages do not offer uninsured or underinsured
Right.
motorist coverage. So you could have $1 million in an umbrella but it doesn't cover you beyond your auto policy. So you really need to, again, read the policies, work with a good broker. I think the other thing about umbrellas that really comes up more in my practice, and just people your people listening should really be thinking about, inverse of what we've been talking about, which is what if you really hurt somebody else? I
Yeah,
mean, nobody's driving down the freeway and thinks they're going to cause a catastrophic car accident where, God forbid, somebody dies or has very, very serious injuries. But it
accidents
happens
happen. Yeah,
every single day. And it's like all of a sudden, in a snap of your fingers, your life has changed if you've injured somebody else. And that's really usually where umbrella coverages become so important. And I'm
absolutely.
gonna and I'm gonna tell your listeners something they may not realize, which is, assuming the police responded to the accident and there's a police report, well, your address is in there, and if it's not in there, there's ways that the lawyer representing the injured party can get your address. And the first thing that they do is go on Zillow or Redfin and see how much your house is worth.
Mhm.
So if you have poor insurance and you're listening to this and you didn't kind of do that insurance audit and all of a sudden something terrible happens and you have more of a minimal policy, you're putting your whole estate at risk. And so that's where umbrella policies really come in, again, as a financial hedge. A lot of times if you injure somebody else. And the way that works is, let's say you have 500,000 in auto policies. Again, I'm not trying to get too specific in
Yeah.
that there's no false
You're
states, but
not
let's just assume
advising, it's just an
I'm
example.
not advising. Yeah. So let's assume you have a 500,000 in auto policies, but this person is really catastrophically injured and their case is worth 2.5 million. It's not to say that a personal injury lawyer is going to take your house necessarily. Most states have something called a homestead exemption, where, like, even if there was a judgment against you for $2 million, they couldn't force you to sell your primary residence. But I just want people to understand that you can't really like hide how much you are worth from a personal injury lawyer. They're gonna figure it out. And if you're really poorly insured, they may expect you to make an individual contribution beyond your policy limits to settle the case if they're representing somebody whose life is fundamentally changed because of an accident where you're responsible. So again, looking at that financial hedge for yourself in the inverse by making sure you have really good auto insurance. And then the way that happens is, God forbid that happens, and the settlement is worth more than your auto insurance policy limits. That's when umbrella coverages kick in. And so it's just an additional insurance. And usually you have to have good auto policies, at least here in California. Generally, you have to have 250,000 per person, 500,000 per incident as a minimal auto policy in order to even have an insurance company write an umbrella policy.
I
But
typically see
that's
the
never
same in Michigan. So they're not the, insurance company doesn't want to cover excess liability on a poorly protective policy. So they always look at that, and then it typically is tied as a rider to your homeowner's policy. Well,
that's absolutely correct.
so, Megan, thank you so much for giving us these insights that I think are unique and, a perspective that we don't hear every day. Um, and keep doing the great work that you do for your clients. Where can people find you? I know you're active on LinkedIn, but tell us just a little bit more. And for California listeners, Megan is a practicing attorney in the Bay Area in California.
So thanks, Melissa. You can go to our website, which is www.miradorlaw.com. And Mirador is spelled Miradorlaw.com. And for folks out there who don't speak Spanish, Mirador means a tower with an extensive view, which is how we see our work for our clients as strategic visionaries in the law, which is why we picked the name Mirador Law. So you can visit us on our website, give us a call at 925-460-484. I am only barred and licensed in the state of California. However, if there's somebody out there that is injured in another state, and I happen to know quite a few lawyers, so you're happy to reach out to me by email or by phone, and I'm happy to try to connect you to somebody who is actually licensed in your state. But we primarily actually exclusively handle cases in the state of California and mostly focus in Northern California.
Excellent. Well, it's been an insightful discussion, and I know it's a rainy day when people really need to hear this episode, but there's so much value um, for those that are injured, but also for all of us who use insurance as a protective layer in our financial plan. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Money Wisdom podcast. If you found value in this episode, the best way that you can support the podcast is to forward an episode to a friend or leave a review. Go to proplan.com and the podcast link to get all the resources and links mentioned. This presentation by Pearl Planning is intended for general information purposes only. No portion of this presentation serves as a receipt of or a substitute for personal investment advice from Pearl Planning or any other investment professional of your choosing. Copies of Pearl Planning's current written disclosure brochure and Form CRS discussing our advisory services and fees are available upon request or on our website platform at pearlplan.com. The information that we share is meant to educate and inspire, not serve as personalized financial advice. Everyone's situation is unique, so be sure to consult with your own financial professional for guidance that fits your life. And just so you know, the opinions shared in this podcast are Melissa's own and those of her guests. They don't necessarily represent any organizations with which Melissa is affiliated. For more important disclosures, please go to our webpage at pearlplan.com.